Mitch Light joins us. Mitch, hope you had a good weekend. I know you went to Memphis to watch some basketball. That did not end so well for you, but other than that, I hope it went well.
I enjoyed Saturday, the bye week for the Commodores. I spent some serious couch time from about 11 a.m. to about midnight watching football and barely got up just to eat and, take care of some other necessities. So that was fun. And then my son and I, 15-year-old son, we're big Brooklyn Nets fans. I'm a Nets fan from way back in the Jersey days. So we drove to Memphis to go to the game last night with some friends, and they lost by a 3-pointer in overtime at the buzzer. So, other than that, it was a good weekend.
This has nothing to do with anything, but are you a big Halloween guy? Does that move the needle in your household? I guess since your kids are older, probably not.
Yeah, my daughter's, I was out of the house and my son's 15, and he might like put on a hat and like do something stupid to make an excuse to go around with some of the neighbors and get some candy. But I don't think he's been planning a Halloween costume. Although I have dressed as a cow for 24 of the last 25 years. I have a cow outfit that I bought when I lived in New York City, and I wear it to work every Halloween. And it's kind of a running joke how my lack of creativity with my Halloween costume.
That's great. I think that gets you like free Chick-fil-A one day a year. So
it does.
Might ought to think about that.
We've had neighbors come borrow, like kids in the street knew I had that cow outfit, and they've come borrowed it and worn it. So
let's talk baseball for a minute, since that's, well, at least Vanderbilt played this weekend, even though it was an exhibition game. The Commodores beat Oklahoma State by a composite 12-7. I think they won the first game. I believe it was 9-0. Really good pitching in that one. But I think the thing that stood out, I believe there was a 430 on base mark for the team over the weekend. Oklahoma State's generally a pretty good team, and I think a lot of their big guns were sitting out. You see home runs from guys like Matt Hogan, who I don't think had necessarily been a huge factor in the fall from what I'd heard. That was opposite field. Dominic Keegan hit one off the batter's eye. From everything I've heard, he might have been their best hitter in fall so far. So I think that's kind of some encouraging things if you're a Vanderbilt fan, because I think you figure the pitching will be stellar, barring injuries. The bats were the thing that you don't really know, and I think to have guys that you don't know come forward and have big offensive weekends, I think there were a couple other guys in there too. The names escape me at the moment, but I think that was, I mean, who knows? It's an exhibition game. I wasn't there, but Oklahoma State, again, a good team. I think some encouraging developments offensively.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Chris. I'm with you that I think the pitching will be a strength, starting and relieving, and it's just how many bats can they identify to be consistent. And I think one of the names you mentioned is probably a guy that a lot of fans might not be counting on, but or have too many expectations. But I heard great things about Dominic Keegan late last year. I believe he got some work at first base. The catching position, especially with Duvall, is probably as deep as it's been with the two freshmen. Heard good things about them. And then so Keegan might be a DH first baseman, but I'd be surprised if he's not in the lineup most days.
Yeah, I think he or Justin Henry Malloy, one will win probably first base and the other will most likely be their everyday DH. I think their concern is outfield. Everybody thinks Austin Martin is going to be their center fielder. I think Davis will be their left fielder. And I'm drawing a blank on right field.
Isaiah Thomas.
Yes, of course, Isaiah Thomas. And those are three. I mean, that's got potential to be maybe as good as outfield as anybody has in the league, because Thomas is really talented. But, boy, depth behind that, it gets thin in a hurry. It was good, I think, from a Vanderbilt perspective to see Hogan hit the ball, because let's say that for some reason they play Austin Martin at short. I don't think they will, but he's working out there a lot. I think that Tate Colwick will wind up being the guy. But let's say an injury somewhere happens. They're really, really thin in the outfield. So seeing Hogan hit the ball, I think was a good sign.
Yeah, I agree. There's some guys that will emerge, but there's no obvious candidates there. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I have a tough time, and I know they've got some, other guys who can play third. I thought Austin Martin turned into a really good third baseman last year, and I hate to take away a strength and put him at shortstop. I think I'd rather see him in center field than shortstop, but that's just me from afar, not being there while they're working out. But I think that's going to be really one of the storylines to watch. Where will Austin Martin play?
Well, there's such variance at short, and Vanderbilt has been spoiled because it went from Dansby Swanson to Connor Kaiser to Ethan Paul, who had a remarkably much better year, I think, than anybody had projected a year ago, and was just super steady from start to finish. Hard to do that in 1 year, changing positions. But I think that's the thing is, if Tate Colwick comes in and is okay, can hit the ball a little bit and is steadying the field, I think they're fine. But that's sort of the other wild card. And the other one is Spencer Jones, who I've heard is really athletic. He's really fast, I'm told, for a 6'7" kid. And I think you've heard some good things about him as well.
Yeah, that his bat's like too good to not be in the lineup, and he's also a two-way player, a pitcher as well, coming off an injury, I believe, right? And so that's it seems to be a theme in recent years. Some guys are positionless, so to speak. Now they found position for Austin Martin, they found a position for Harrison Ray. Not saying that they couldn't play, but certain guys come in and say, yeah, that he's a center fielder, he's a second baseman, whatever. But with Justin Henry Malloy and all these guys, you got to find it and hope the defense doesn't suffer. We were worried at this time last year, I believe, about the defense, but it turned out where Harrison Ray played a really good second base, and like we've talked about, Austin Martin played well at third, and I think Ethan Paul surpassed everyone's expectations at shortstop after being kind of shaky at second base.
The other thing, I don't know if you got a chance to look at the schedule, but boy, they've got some challenging games next year. They've got the games in the MLB4 Challenge. Those are always some good teams. They play, I believe, is it UCLA, USC, and I think TCU is involved in there again at Dodger Stadium. Hawaii in the out-of-conference, Illinois, Chicago in a non-conference series. That's usually tricky. And boy, I'm trying to find it on my calendar as we're doing this live. I think they open
Mississippi State, LSU, and Ole Miss from the West.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember who they open against. It's the home opener. It's not a marquee. It's like an OVC or a Missouri Valley type team. I think the latter. But anyway, it's not the easiest schedule. I do think they open with Kentucky at home, which is unusual. They usually play Kentucky later in the schedule.
Then go to Tennessee in week 2. So play those two East rivals earlier than usual.
Yeah, and usually you're thinking with the newer lineup, you might want to break it a little bit easier, which, I mean, comparatively, I guess they do. Tennessee and Knoxville is never easy. But I think it's almost the opposite to me this year. You'd almost rather, well, I don't know. I guess it probably doesn't matter, but it's interesting to think through. Some years they've gone on the road, they've gone to some of the tougher places. This year it seems like the schedule and conference play, they break in a little easier.
Yeah. But I think the program at this stage and expectations are high every year, and the schedule is always so good from a rating standpoint that they can afford to a few hiccups earlier if it's a lineup and transition. So I didn't look at that line, the schedule, and be like, oh, that's too difficult. It's interesting closing with Mississippi State at home. That could be, it could be SEC title, potentially implications there, but that's turning into a new rival there from the West. So it looked like a, really fun schedule.
South Alabama is who they open with. That's a 2-game weekday series. South Alabama, usually a typically respectable baseball program. I don't know what they are this year. Evansville is on the schedule. Seems like Evansville is on the schedule a lot these days. MTSU, interestingly enough, they do not do the return trip to Murfreesboro this year.
That's the first time I can remember Vanderbilt not playing at MTSU.
Yeah, he being Corbin and their old coach, Peterson, were really close, I think. I think they respected each other a lot. I don't know, and I didn't ask. I don't know if the rain delay thing 2 years ago, if there's still some bad blood with that or not, but that was interesting that Middle agreed to come to Nashville without the return trip, because usually that's probably, I would have to think, one of their biggest draws, if not their biggest draw of the year.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was always a good, easy road game for Vanderbilt to play, to get another midweek road game. You might have it scheduled in front of me if they go to Western Kentucky or another local team, because you do want to pick up a few road games. And by the way, I just looked up on Warren Nolan. South Alabama was 30-26 last year, 16-14 in the Sun Belt with a 104 RPI. So obviously, neither of us know what they've got coming back or anything like that, but basically it's slightly over 500 team.
Well, and that's an area where historically there's been a lot of baseball talent in around that area.
Yeah, very reputable program.
Interesting to see. They go Georgia here in weekend 3 of SEC play. Then they go to LSU. Then South Carolina at home. That's a little bit of a break. And then they go to Ole Miss. That's a pretty brutal month of play right there in conference weekend.
Yeah, and Georgia was the only, correct me if I'm wrong, Georgia was the only team to take a series from Vanderbilt last year and really could have gotten swept. Vanderbilt kind of stole that Friday night game with some late home runs there. So that would be, you're looking, again, Georgia was the only team that looked like it was, at the time, the better team than Vanderbilt when the two teams played.
Texas A&M also took a series.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the opening series on the road.
Interesting week, too. Towards the end of the year, they play Louisville on May the 5th, and then they go to Gainesville for a game. I guess it's a Thursday, 2 games later. So they have that road trip to Florida following the Louisville game here, and just a 2-day turnaround in Gainesville. Of course, that's always an interesting series. Florida's the worst it's been in a while, but I have to think they'll be preseason top 10 again, as they pretty much always are. I think that was an aberration year.
Yeah, they got they had a really young pitching staff, I believe. I think they got a lot of guys coming back.
And the close with Mississippi State, as you noted, too. So
yeah.
Anyway, let's talk hoops for a minute. I don't know if you've been dug in recently. I don't know if you got to go to the scrimmage last week. I did get to see some of that. Just want to get your running thoughts on hoops at the moment, since there is an exhibition game Friday against Clark of Atlanta, and then the 6th, which I don't remember the date on that or the day of the week, but the 6th is the opener against SEMO. So that is upon us quickly, Mitch. Yeah,
we got the Johnny McCrary Bowl on Friday night. I think that's where he finished out his quarterbacking career at Clark, Atlanta. Played there for 2 years. So, I unfortunately don't have much to add to the discussion here, Chris. I had a kid-child commitment, something with my son last Wednesday. I talked to a few people who were there. The one interesting thing that I took away was that people said Dylan Dessou looked good, and both of us early in the preseason, over the summer, independently talking to Jerry Stackhouse, got the impression that he was having some knee issues and might redshirt. So I don't know if you were there, and was he full go? Does he look like he will be playing this year?
I was there. He looked stunningly good. Now, I don't know what it means. It's an inter-squad scrimmage. He's playing against other Vanderbilt players, and honest to God, I'm not super impressed with him at the 4 and the 5 spots. They've got some potential. We'll see how it turns out. But I'll put it this way. I saw about half the scrimmage, and if I didn't know anything else, and you said, hey, that kid right there, and you pointed to Dessou is their best player, I wouldn't have had evidence to refute you just based on what I'd seen. He was that good when I saw him.
That's good to hear, because, going from a potential redshirt to a potential difference maker, and I heard from 3 different people who were there just texting me that he looked good. I heard Neesmith looked good, as we would expect there. So, we'll see. Obviously, expectations aren't very high, and rightfully so. You got a team that's did not win an SEC game last year, so I think I don't mean this like a good place to be. It's just there's really no expectation. So this group can go out, and I'm sure they have internal expectations and all that. That's fine. That's good. They should. But they should be able to go out without any pressure on them. Where last year there was under such scrutiny early, and then obviously with the injuries and all that stuff, the season took several wrong turns last year.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what they've got in the post. I didn't see anybody really stand out there. I guess we kind of have an idea what Cleavon Brown can do. I would presume Cleavon is going to be maybe a 5-point, 6 to 7 rebound, block and a half a game kind of guy this year. Probably counted on more for defense than offense. I'm just not really sure. I didn't think the freshman looked particularly ready. I didn't think the kid from Rice, he was okay, but he didn't blow me away. But back to Dessou, the thing that I liked is that he hit a couple of 3-pointers, I believe. He made a really nice kind of pivot move inside, got the ball in the lane and kind of spun around and used his body to get an angle to make a tough shot in traffic. I think he hit maybe a fast break layup or a short range jumper. So the thing that I liked about him is he showed the ability to score in a number of ways, and he looked pretty fluid for a freshman.
Yeah, interesting there. And I don't know if what you saw, but I've heard that the staff believes Ejike Obinna is going to be a contributor, that he is a really good player. Maybe not this year, but will be a good player, that they, a true SEC quality big guy that they'll be counting on. Again, not sure how much this year, still developing. So I'll be interested to watch his progress.
Yeah, I didn't see him do a whole lot in the scrimmage, and the last staff really liked him too. They thought that down the road, once he developed, he was potentially very good. I don't know if it's clicked yet. The other thing I forgot to mention is Scottie Pippen, I thought, handled the ball fairly well. From what I understand, I think they would like him to be their point guard. I don't know that he will start the season as their point guard. I think they will use he and Saban Lee at the same time. I thought Saban looked fine. So, if you've got a usable part in Pippen, just for argument's sake, and you add Lee and Neesmith, you say that you can get something out of Cleavon Brown. Dessou is something. Matt Moyer kind of made a wild card. I think that they should. I've maintained for a while, I would tell him to go do your best Dennis Rodman imitation. I don't think that he's going to serve them well shooting jumpers on the perimeter or mid-range jump shots, but I think he's athletic and he's aggressive and he can attack the glass. And he was supposed to be their best offensive rebounder in preseason last year. I'm just like, let's try to find, if I'm the staff, let's try to find roles for guys. And Neesmith's your guy and is your scorer, and Dessou can do some things. I wonder if you break it down like that. Again, they're really thin and they're pretty young, but at least there's a glimmer of hope to start the season if you can find roles for guys. That's really what you want, is just something to give the team and the fans something to believe in going into the season.
Yeah, I agree. Moyer, I agree to call him a wild card. You just want to see a team that you think is playing hard and well coached, and I think that was the problem. I never questioned the effort last year, but I never thought I was watching the most well coached team. And that's frustrating when you combine, not the most talented team, because over the years you can say what you want about Kevin Stallings, but my tenure, back to when I was in school with Eddie Fogler, usually I always felt that Vanderbilt was a well-coached team and was going to maximize its talent, and I don't really think that was the case the last few years.
Let's switch to football for a minute before we go into the mailbag. Did anything stand out to you in terms of Vanderbilt's opponents? I know Tennessee keeps looking tougher. Kentucky, with Lynn Bowden playing quarterback and converted receiver, had, 200-something rushing yards. They beat Missouri in just a really rainy, dreary game where Missouri may have perhaps mailed it in. South Carolina, of course, that season has gone crazy the last couple of weeks since it beat Georgia in Athens and then loses by 20 at Tennessee. Anything that you took away from the future opponents when you watched them that you think has some relevance as they match up with Vanderbilt down the road?
Well, Tennessee clearly is being more explosive in the passing game, and Garantano, who got, I think, broke his wrist on his non-throwing arm. We'll see how non-throwing hand, or I guess if your wrist is on your hand, whatever. You know what I mean? We'll see how that impacts them down the road. But, they looked much more explosive than they have. Jawan Jennings obviously had a huge game. That was a very impressive game by wide receivers there. Brian Edwards, who I've always liked, been impressed with him, watching him up close in person. He had, one of the best catches you'll see there. So, South Carolina's an interesting team. They've had a lot of injuries. They're still banged up. I saw Rico Dowdle, the running back. They've got some depth there. He'll be out. They've had some injuries on the offensive line. Not super impressed with South Carolina other than that Georgia game. Missouri, to me, I know Vanderbilt's already played them, but they're like a kind of an old school, sometimes you see in college basketball, a team that's just great at home and really bad on the road. I mean, their home road splits couldn't be more dramatic. Dominated pretty much everyone at home, and they've played very poorly on the road. For Kentucky, give them credit. I don't know if Lynn Bowden at your quarterback is sustainable long term, but it seems to be working in the short term, and that'll be interesting to see where they are at that point if Sawyer Smith is getting healthy, if they want him to be the quarterback, or if they just keep with Lynn Bowden. So that'll be interesting to watch.
We'll go ahead and go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. If you're looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs, Josh can have you covered. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him, josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or Facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it on this podcast. H.D. Young says, I'm curious to know whether you all believe Mo Hasan as the quarterback should be viewed as the offense or whether it should be viewed as an offensive package.
If he's healthy, and I don't know, I have not been over there at all. I didn't go to practice this week. I'll go later this week, so I really don't know. I think they're giving the indication that he will be healthy, but I don't know that to be true. I would put Mo Hasan as the quarterback, not a package. I think you give him the offense, and if he really struggles, and you got Riley Neal as a backup, but I would not just have a package for him at this point.
The thing I would like to see them expand on is using him in the run-pass option, let him carry the ball a little bit more, and I'm anxious also to see what they can get out of his arm. I don't think he's going to throw it a lot, maybe 12 to 15 times at most, but I don't know what he can give them there. He didn't look bad throwing the ball against Missouri, right, but it's a really small sample size.
Right. My whole take is it's not like they were throwing the ball downfield successful anyway, so you're not losing that necessarily when you put him in the game. You're adding the running element, whether it's a predetermined or whether it's an RPO or whether it's a just scramble. You add something to the offense there. So we might get into a situation where teams force him to throw the ball downfield, and if he can't do it, you need to make a switch. You go ahead and do that. But I would like to see him have the ability to run the entire offense.
Ann Arbador says, is Mo Hasan on scholarship? And if not, whose cage do we have to rattle to get him on scholarship?
I don't believe he is, and I don't know much about his situation. I know he's from Miami. Sometimes kid could be on financial aid elsewhere, so it doesn't need, quote unquote, need the scholarship. And I don't know. They might not have any scholarships available for the rest of this semester. So maybe it's the type of thing where they'd put him on scholarship next semester with guys leaving, some of the fifth-year guys or guys not coming back. So I don't believe he's on scholarship. I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, from my understanding, he played, St. Thomas Aquinas, I think, and then went to Syracuse.
Yeah.
Expecting to get a scholarship. It did not materialize, and then he transferred and went the JUCO route. I mean, I say expecting to get a scholarship. I think he wanted to come up there, walk on for a year, prove he was good enough. Syracuse did not agree. So then he went to the JUCO route, and then when Vanderbilt got in a pinch with Deuce Wallace last year with that situation, they found him and brought him in as a walk-on. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I don't have any inside info on this, but I think putting him on scholarship before next year might be wise because obviously Riley Neal cannot come back. You've got Deuce Wallace, who is going to be a fifth-year player. Deuce, I don't know, he may just choose to move on and do something else. If he's not got the starting job by the end of 4 years and they're looking at bringing in transfers, and plus they've got Ken Seals, that may be a situation where he just says, hey, I'm going to move on with my life and see what happens from there. Alan Walters hasn't played after 2 years. I would not be shocked to see him transfer out. So might not be the worst thing to put Mo Hasan on scholarship.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Mo's going anywhere unless he decides to give it up. It's not like he's going to, I guess he could grad transfer, but I would expect to see him back, especially if he plays the rest of the year. And you're pretty much accurate on the Syracuse experience. I know the Syracuse beat writer who writes for Athlon Sports, writes for our previews, and I asked him that same question. He's like, yeah, Mo thought he deserved a scholarship after getting there, and the Syracuse staff disagreed, so he transferred, basically looking to play somewhere else. And not to read too much into body language or other things, because we'd both heard that Alan Walters didn't necessarily get off to the best start at Vanderbilt as far as ready to play. I've heard better things about his performance recently, and he was more engaged than I've ever seen him on the sidelines during the last game, the Missouri game. Now, I talked in the last podcast how the entire team had more energy on the sideline, but he's pretty just kind of, sometimes he signals in, sometimes he doesn't, but he was really into the game, and I don't know, maybe he's been, got some energy because he's playing better in practice or what have you, or sees that there's an opportunity for him to play next year. Don't know, but he was, like I said, he was very engaged last week.
Dusty Orleans says, this is not a Mason-specific question, but recent events have made me curious. When is the best time to fire a coach? During the season, so there is time to find a replacement and give them time to prepare the recruiting class, or after the season when more candidates are possibly available? Does a new early signing period factor into the equation?
That's a good question. And the new early signing period factors in big time because it's in December. I don't think not firing the guy doesn't prevent you from searching for candidates, through, back channels and search firms and all that stuff. And so I think just because, and again, we're speaking in generalities here. We're not speaking about Vanderbilt necessarily because we don't know what's going to happen. But just because so you don't elect to fire a coach midseason doesn't mean you're not already talking to people. I think as far as my opinion on firing coaches midseason, I just think each case is different. If you have a case where the team's totally checked out, like let's say Vanderbilt lost to UNLV like they did and got blown out by Missouri, and Malcolm Turner decided Vanderbilt's moving on, then I think it's okay that you make the move and promote an interim, because again, this is all hypothetical, because the writing's on the wall. You're just prolonging the inevitable. You're putting everyone in a difficult position to play another month when everyone knows what's going to happen. So I'm not opposed to doing it midseason if the writing is on the wall and clearly you have no intention of retaining that coach.
Well, to recruiting those guys, it's just easier and easier to opt out of signed LOIs anyway. So I think I'm not going to say that's not a non-factor, because it's definitely a factor. And I don't know exactly. It's so new, I don't know exactly how all that will play out in terms of coaching changes. But my theory has always been, that aside, if you know it's not working, I think it is better to go ahead and make the move. Of course, you would not make a coaching change mid-season. You would appoint an interim coach, kind of like Vanderbilt did with Robbie Caldwell, although that was before the season. But I think that gets it out there that, hey, our job is going to be open. And I think that gets you kind of a head start. That is my 30,000-foot view. Now, on the inside, it may work very differently, but that's been my opinion for a while.
Yeah, in certain cases, I mean, it's rare. If you're going to make a move, coaches you can say, hey, you're not coming back next year, coach. If you want to stay on and coach the last 2 or 3 weeks, you can do that. We've seen that happen. It's a little awkward, but it depends on the relationship with the coach and the school. So that's one thing. And if you've got the scenario where you decide to make a move mid-season or late in the season, and you've got your guy lined up, then he can get his staff in place, and he can get the ball rolling right away and try and recruit for a couple weeks before that December period. Like, it got much criticized because Watson Brown was beloved, but after my sophomore year, after back-to-back 1-10 seasons, Paul Houlihan fired Watson Brown on a Sunday night and had Jerry DiNardo ready to go, I think, a day later. And I thought that was a good move. Like, you had your guy lined up. People didn't like to kind of behind the back, and I don't know all the inner workings and all that stuff, but they had the guy in place literally like a day or two later, and that's ideal if you can do that.
Yeah, I think the groundwork for that was laid after the SMU game, for what I understand. And I think most ADs, look, I mean, it's just how the business works. These coaches are getting paid several $1 million, and if you're not doing the job, the AD's head is on the chopping block. If football doesn't work out, that guy could get fired too. I think most of these guys I think they're always looking around and sniffing into things here and there long before they make a move on a coach if it gets to that territory.
Yeah, I agree. It's just kind of a necessary part of the business, and both coaches have to be ready, and administrators have to be ready.
Well, with agents too, you have plausible deniability. So if you're going after a guy, hey, have you been contacted about the Vanderbilt job? He can say no, and he can be honest about it too.
Right. Exactly.
Mr. Vandy says, which game over the weekend shocked you the most?
It has to be Kansas State, Oklahoma. Kansas State really like climbing the coach there from North Dakota State. Seemed to be a perfect fit there, but the Oklahoma had been dominating everyone. Their offense was great the other day too. I think they had 54 offensive snaps. They let Kansas State control the ball too much, running the ball. So yeah, just very surprised by that. Michigan dominating Notre Dame. I wasn't surprised they won, but the way they dominated the game, that was surprising there too. And that was pretty much it. It wasn't too many big shockers. But I think you'd have to put Oklahoma and Kansas State number one.
Yeah, the Michigan thing is going to be interesting because the whole narrative around Harbaugh coming into this season was he's just not beating the big teams and those sorts of things, and fans were unhappy. And, of course, they didn't get the best start to the season, either the way they played out of the gate. But what's your take on where that's headed now?
They're playing better, and Michigan not into the moral victories and all that, of course, but to fall behind Penn State like they did, and it looked like it was going to get ugly there, and basically had a chance to tie the game until the Bell kid dropped the pass there. So they're playing better. Right now they've got 2 losses. They got at Maryland, Michigan State, at home at Indiana, that they're going to be in position to be 9-2 heading to an Ohio State game. If they go 10-2, if they somehow beat Ohio State at home, they go 10-2. That has to be considered a success there. I've always been a Harbaugh guy. I don't love him personally. I don't love his shtick, but I think he's a good coach, and he's at Michigan at a time when their arch rivals just dominating the league. Ohio State is so good. Michigan's won one national title in 30, 40 years or something like that. Bo Schembechler never won a national title, so it's a great program that maybe everyone kind of inflates. Again, if he goes 9-3 this year, it's a disappointment, but it's not a debacle. And a lot of coaches take some time. Phil Fulmer was at Tennessee for a while before he broke through and won that national championship. Tom Osborne, same thing at Nebraska, where we live in the era now where expectations are so great. Harbaugh brought a lot of that on himself. Again, they're playing better. I still think he can get it done at Michigan.
I'm guessing over the last 40 or 50 years, there's very few programs that have had a floor that is lower or higher than Michigan's, but they just have not been elite very often. But, man, they are so dadgum consistent at winning 8, 9, 10, 11 games.
Yeah, they had a little bit of a hiccup there, with Rich Rod. Brady Hoke went 5-7 his last year. Rich Rodriguez went 3-9 and 5-7. But before that, they went from 2007. I'm just scrolling down all the way back to 65 without 67 with losing records. So just very, very consistent, winning 10 games a lot, never winning a national title, but being very consistent. Their coach before Bo Schembechler was Bump Elliott, not the former Vanderbilt pitcher Bump Elliott from the 90s, a different Bump Elliott.
Or not the bump whatever from The Natural.
No, definitely not.
And I don't know why I used the word dadgummed. I don't think I've ever used that on the podcast before. That's like the ultimate Southern football coach speak.
Well, you're a fine Southern gentleman. So
I as far as you know. So,
yeah, exactly.
Even though I was born in Britain, did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yes, and it was only for 4 months. My dad was in the military.
Well, you're only born once, so right. you were either born in the U.S. or you weren't.
Yes, we are. We bring all kinds of knowledge to this.
I'm going to start singing "I'm Proud to Be an American."
I suppose in 2019 I should be offended by that or something, but I'm not. So
yeah.
Anyway,
you had to find a way.
Right, exactly. With the shock culture.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, I like this one. Vandy Serum says, Mitch, will Alabama versus LSU be a memorable game with a fair amount of big plays, or will it be a slugfest of which both defenses dominate the other team's offense? Who wins and by what margin? I don't see this being a defensive struggle with these two offenses. I think this will be an LSU-Alabama game like maybe we've never seen.
I would be surprised if the losing team scores fewer than 28 points. I think both teams will be in the 30s. I think both defenses have their vulnerabilities. Both offenses are outstanding. Evidently, if you believe Nick Saban, that Tua's recovery is going better than last year with a similar injury. I'd love to see him back. Going to have to record that game. The times just came out. Vanderbilt will be playing at Florida at 11 a.m., so I will be back in Nashville, usually that's a quick trip to Florida. We'll be back around 6 o'clock Central Time. The game's at 2:30, so I'll probably record it and, watch it the next day. But that's one I don't want to miss.
When was the 9-6 game? Was that 09 or 011? Or not 011?
2011. 2011.
Okay, yeah. I remember the graphic that was circulating where Alabama missed all the field goals and they just put like goalposts all through the end zone. I thought that was funny. But Yeah, a lot's changed since then. Alabama's defense just isn't what it once was.
Well, they're first of all, they're very young. They're very injured. They have a lot of preseason injuries. They've got true freshmen. At some key spots at linebacker on the defensive line there. So I think that's part of it. And they're also, facing some. I was going to say facing some better offenses, but really they haven't yet. But I would be surprised if that LSU offense does not, put up some points.
Last question from Ms. M. In a hypothetical but unlikely scenario, Vanderbilt beats South Carolina and Florida. Do the fans show up for the final home game of the season against Kentucky and outnumber Kentucky fans in our stadium? Or is good attendance at Vandy football games not possible? Some used to say Franklin was less than pleased with attendance when he left.
Well, the final home game is ETSU the week after that. I don't know. Kentucky's a program that brings a lot of fans when they're doing well, and when they're not, they don't. And, they are right now, Kentucky is 4-4. They play Tennessee, and then they're off before they play Vanderbilt. I don't think it'll be a ton of Kentucky fans, but I don't know how many Vanderbilt fans will be there. If Vanderbilt wins its next two games, I think you'll see more people there. I don't know. It's, don't really know what to expect with that.
Might also depend on whether Kentucky has a Friday night basketball game or not, too, and what time the kickoff is. Like, if it's an 11 o'clock kickoff or something, then it might make it a little tougher. Yeah,
so the weather obviously plays into a factor there. So,
Mitch, anything else before we end today?
Not really. Just getting ready. I always enjoy trips to South Carolina, although Vanderbilt's never for a program that hasn't really won at a high level. South Carolina had some good years under Steve Spurrier. Vanderbilt really has, after winning two in a row in 06 or 07 and 08, I don't think Vanderbilt's beaten South Carolina. So the Commodores are due to break through. They've come very close against South Carolina, but it's just can never seem to get that W against South Carolina.
Mitch, thanks for joining us today. Please feel free to give out your Twitter handle and any place that people can pick up Athlon's magazine. Or Athlon magazine, excuse me. I've had a caller that has chastised me on my use of the plural there, so I will correct myself.
Okay, well, for being really honest, it's Athlon Sports, but it's okay. I get you. So it's at Athlon Mitch, which I guess it should be at Athlon Sports Mitch, but that's not how Twitter works. You want a shorter handle. So at Athlon Mitch, and then our magazine's on sale most places on our website at athlonsports.com/store. And if you like college football talk, you can listen to me and Braden on the Cover 2 podcast.
Thank you, Mitch. He is Mitch Light. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We appreciate you listening, and we'll join you with more episodes coming later in the week.